Okay, well, if anybody's out there, this is going to be recorded for posterity, right? So the short film's getting lit. It's pretty close. This is a particular sequence in the beginning where I kind of started art directing the lighting from this sequence. Well, actually, it started from a different scene, but I abandoned an earlier look to go for this. I want to say painterly look, even though it's still full CG. I mean, you can tell this is an entirely CG project, but there are elements that I left in there, and I've talked about this a million times. But on the character itself, I left very rough, sculpted brush strokes in the geometry, and these are just normal maps on the surface here. I mean, that cause a lot of these little highlights and glints. And the actual geometry is extremely low. I can open this scene, which is shot 12B. I'm going to have to usually work in two different viewports. Just move that one out of the way. So you have this giant 3D working viewport. It's usually in shaded view right now. I think I have geometry hidden and perspective turned off. And you can see character here, all its rigging and whatever, but I'll be working on my second monitor with this stuff. And I always keep this, I love keeping one big as large as possible. You could reverse these as well, but I like keeping this one viewport kind of frozen, not locked to the 3D view at all. Uh, always view the camera. I know everybody does that. It's not much of a, it's not much of a pro tip, is it? But force a habit. You know, as nearsighted as I am, it's got to be. You hit the home key, fill the screen, take out all the view widgets from the monitor there. This becomes a really nice way to just view your animation, no matter what. Now you can see in the rendered view, I am using Eevee. Right now, the viewport's only shaded with 10 samples. I'm rendering at 64 just for a little speed. The real final renders of this, the absolute last pass, I may crank it up to, on certain shots, maybe 128 to 256 samples. And really that becomes sort of superfluous, at some point, with the depth of field turned on. I mean, there's no need for sharpness and any of the details back here. Some of these monitors I get very close to and they have that moire pattern, and you know the drill. That stuff buzzes if you don't sample it high enough. You can already see, when you get closer to some of these details, extra sampling will really help this kind of stuff. But what I really loved about this particular look, which is a really simple compositor setup in Blender, is that it takes this, which is the normal lit view, which was already kind of cool with, the normal map working on it to disturb these edges so they're not so CG smooth. It already turned them into something like a paint stroke, right? With a harsh enough lighting pass and a few different lighting settings, and maybe I'll go through those here today. But the compositor just kicks up all of this extra edge detail, and it really accentuates the borders between a lot of this harsher lighting. Like, you can see what it's doing at the edges to some of these, you know, the edge of the lighting between things. This is kind of how I paint anyway. Very, I like to go in, in a lot of the comics, if you've read any of the Encoding Bushido comics, so there are tons of frames where I just kick a really, striking color highlight on an edge to get lighting effects. And here's the same thing happening in Blender, with a lighting pass and a little touch from the compositor. But I love the intensity of so much of this lighting, and I'll show you this compositor setup, which is, it couldn't be simpler. I'm really just doing a sharpen with lens distortion and then a small color correct for some of the contrast, a film-like setting on the RGB curves, and then a really subtle tweak between the hues, saturation and things like that. You can play a lot with this, and just it goes crazy, to stylize a look. Like even that's pretty damn cool. I mean, it's very much, uh, a graphic novel look with especially today with the way digital colorists are now, I feel, responsible for establishing so much more of the look of modern comics when an inker puts down his pen and here comes the colorist, and like boom, everything just goes off. I mean, just look at the difference between, this is the level of geometry we're talking here. This is uh I can do an overlay here. um, or I could do an overlay here. Let's say wireframe. I don't know why that's not letting me do that, but there you go. See the level of geometry we're talking about here versus the amount of detail that comes just from ZBrush normal maps. It's substantial, that's pretty cool overlay. And the original ZBrush project files, it's just like every ballooning, sculpting file before any sort of retopology happens. It's just gigantic, right? You end up with, a few 100 million polygons that you're never going to export. But they contribute to, something like this, these little weird touches and edges. Like in the graphic novel, this diagonal line is something I would draw. Definitely it's just a one stroke, right down that piece of geometry or whatever. But here in Blender, you just get this great contribution of the normal map, and then the lighting just sets off, everything. Just a little note about lighting. I know people are really, really persnickety about balancing their fill light versus key lights and all this other stuff. And for this project in particular, I just kind of, like everybody has in the last few years, everybody fell in love with Arcane and just started painting gleefully, on textures and whatever they wanted. And this is no different. I mean, I lose quite a lot of texture just with the depth of field from, you can take a look at these background pieces. All of this, you can see the strokes on different objects, and especially on stuff like this, it's just the simplest possible brush. And I feel like I feel like I'm in grade school, kind of sloshing paint around, because it's absolutely not a fastidious, arcane level paint job, not in the least. But, the contribution of this sort of stuff texturally to me it's become so much more alluring than virtually anything you could, spit and polish into oblivion. It's just the irregularity from so quick a painting pass. Like I would spend maybe 5 minutes, just let me paint this. This is actually a painted highlight, if you can believe it. That like you can see in the back here, if I turn off some of these cards. By the way, I'll get into that. I'm not like, none of this is volumetric, but this is actually a painted, this light spot is a light spot, when all the lights and cards and everything gets turned on, you get stuff like that, which is, I just think it's the way to go for me anyway. I mean, I loved being able to, with your CG work, to add gross amounts of detail, but when you become responsible for everything that a project entails, all its concepts, all its models, these displays, the displays that animate, the cables that articulate, and they have to act like cables. They have to, have a grounded source, and then they get parented and blah blah blah. The list goes on. And I understand the appreciation, or excuse me, I appreciate the level to which people think AI is going to reduce all of this tedium. But, the tedium at a certain point is kind of the point. But to get back to this whole look, this isn't particularly tedious. I mean, I don't know if it's still in, it's not, I already deleted the previous nodes, but I used to have a node tree that was maybe 3 or 4 times as complicated as this uh, for the essential look. And it was really just a lot of, creating edge details, combining them with, different color effects, and then combining those with different film look effects, and then combining those, and it just became a mess. It was still very fast. I mean, Eevee was so quick to handle all of this stuff. And most of what I was doing was combining color ramps to get these effects, these sort of painted, shaded effects with line textures, which I'm already getting with lighting. I just wanted a cool outlining or highlighting of, the rims and lines and text, the things that I would probably ink, or color and highlight in exactly the same way. So this really is me painting with light, as, pretentious as some people tend to be about the I'm painting with light, it's I get it, dude. Yeah, you're painting with light. Yeah, me too. But I got a job to do here. So just to go through, I'm going to go backwards here. I'm going to open up a previous version of this and just kind of show you the lighting workflow, or look, I'd rather call it the look development workflow, because it really is that combination between, if anybody, this error here, I always just let it pass. It's just the rig comes with a lot of Python that quite honestly is just, it's one of those things, it's, oh, this Python might be suspicious, like this, but I just let that error go. But you can already see this is the previous version, it's sort of rough. His spine was kind of broken in this. I fixed it in the following version. But to go through just the pass, as a rendered pass, there's nothing in here. All right. This is the material shaded view. If anybody doesn't know that keyboard shortcut, Z brings up your rendered, solid, material view, etc. So I'm going to leave this in solid view. I want all the gadgets complete and visible. Kind of look around here. And earlier in the project, I did a ton of look development and really implemented the asset browser, the abilities of the asset browser, to make what you can see this here. It's a little look development folder, and this stuff's super easy to make. I mean, you literally define in your preferences. Like you can see mine here. Where is that? Files and paths. Yeah. Your files and paths, asset library, your user library. You define just a folder. This is mine on my my C drive. And you go into that, or you create files and you save them to that folder. And when you go to your view layer, select them all, right? Let's say it was like this camera. You have a right click and mark as asset. And that'll appear in your asset browser folder, and you can organize them the way you want. Like you add a folder, or a catalog as they call them, and you chuck your stuff in there. So what I did was create a series of these cards. Now, these are just lighting cards. I can show you the working folder for that, or excuse me, the working file, which is they're bloody simple. I mean, they're just literally just one plane covered with paint strokes. I mean, you really can't ask for much. Well, this was the lighting folder, or the lighting file, which I created an asset from. See, it's just all the lights. Took a scene, added the lights, saved it in here. Pretty easy. But the cards, it's just a file I called painted flares. You can see these. That's it. It's just, you can see they're polygons with paint on them. And if you haven't used I know a lot of people call this UQ paint, but I think it's pronounced you see, you paint, as in you see, you work, that kind of thing. I think it's a third-party add-on, if you look for it. UCU. Really useful. I've really enjoyed using it for so far, and every single one of these lit polygons was made using either UCU paint. You can see the nodes if I select one of these. Shift F3 or shader editor, and no, that's the old compositing node. There it is. So I'm just changing contrast on a lot of this stuff. You can see oops, that's this one. Let me isolate that. It's really kind of playing with the strokes, getting different contrast ratios. You see they already look like streams of paint. And these are all the lighting cards. I mean, that's really it. And then you change this emission level and you can actually use these as lighting objects, if you're using them as light probes. But to get back to the file, get back to the original file, shot 47, or excuse me, shot 12B. This window, I'm working backwards right now, and viewport's coming up in the other section there. So I'm going to switch back to the view mode, solid mode, sorry. I want to open up that file browser, or excuse me, asset browser. Make sure I select the user library, and I've already made my look dev folder. Now it's got everything I need to start lighting this file, or look deving this file. It's not just lighting, right? I got my cards, which came from, I can actually show you the scene where those cards came from. They come from here, right? So it's roughly the same view, right? It's got all these, you can see all the paint strokes and stuff on this big volumetric mess back here. So all of that stuff comes in one fell swoop, right? If you look at the view file or the view layers, it'll come in its own collection, and all these objects are local. Now there is the option under these import settings to actually either link, or append. And I'm pretty much choosing to append all of these. Like, it's a good starting point, but I don't want any of the links kind of stopping me cold, when I'm trying to light stuff. I just want to rotate these around a little bit. And then I want to add all the actual lights. Now you can see this little grid. One of the cool things about it is that this is snapping you to the object or the geometry in the scene. Whether you want it flat on the ground or maybe you want it, sticking on the face of an object or something. Now I took the step when making these of putting an empty or a locator for you Maya people. Just a big old locator to stick them on, makes it easy to navigate. You can use a curve, you can use whatever you want, because everything can be made into an asset, right? Including those compositing nodes. Now I've already got the lighting and stuff in there. So if we go back to a rendered view, you can see we're kind of almost there, right? Got all the volumetrics and all this other stuff in there, but Eevee, the default Eevee is like, bleh. So that's not what we want. So I'm gonna go back to, you can leave all of this on, but I don't have the most powerful computer in the world, and sometimes it chokes when I do this. So I'm gonna open another little window here, a split view. So I'm gonna go to my compositor. Am I in the compositor? Yeah, there we go. See, this was the original compositing setup. If you want to take a look at what that looks like, up here in your pop-up, this is the compositor view. See, this didn't really contribute a lot, right? Even with all that work. But the most substantial look change in all of this was, was being contributed from the way the glare, is sort of offset. It had settings that would only glare certain things. Like you see, it's not glaring his eye and all this other stuff. And that was fine, but because sometimes glare can just be overdone, in my opinion. So most of this I got rid of and replaced with. Now you can see this drag drop, it's grouped. One of the things I ran into, I don't know if this is a bug or maybe I was just doing it wrong, but apparently you can't save a lot of these node groups until you make a group out of them. I'm like, I don't know what that's about, but you tell me if I'm doing it wrong because it doesn't matter. It works so well. I mean, there's your groups. I mean, here they are. The only couple of things with this particular setup when you bring it in nodes like that, they're not automatically set up to a viewer in the compositing node. So that control shift to a viewer, and then you have to reset to your resident scene. So that starts us off, right? Now the last thing to get to here in the shader editor is to add the world nodes. Now I had a lot of these already set up too. You can see that just like the other stuff in the look dev department, they weren't contributing much. So I did the same thing here. You know, I look dev that one scene, saved out the nodes, and here we go. So this was pretty much the lighting starting point. Actually, let me just bury that. By the way, if anybody from Blender, you know, gets a listen to this, thank goodness for this feature. I love that. I just have to say that. Yeah, I'm gonna champion Blender for as long as I can, you know. I know all the Maya snobs are, you know, killing me right now. It's cool, dude. You know, whatever you want to play with is whatever you want to play with. Choose your own toys, right? So you can tell there's already substantial differences between this file and the other file, but you know, it's just the basic look. You jump in, drop all your nodes, and you're ready to start playing around. You know, it didn't take too long, you know, to get, you know, to one look or the other. I can actually maybe just crank up some nodes there and get a little smoother shadows. I did reset a lot of this ray tracing stuff, which is, you know, between screen trace and light probe. Really, the only difference there to me was whether or not something passed in front of the character, which would, you know, cause that, you know, what would they call it? Just shadowing or vignetting, you know, because it's all screen based, tracing of the shadows and whatnot. But I've been changing that to ambient occlusion, the fast GI approximation. Now, I really like stuff like this. You know, it's overdone here, sure. And I know a lot of CG snobs, to tell you the truth. So am I. I'm a CG snob, you know, whatever. But that happens a lot, and I love that look. But I want this to be a little more bleak, you know, on the character, so you can see especially what it does to his face. You know, it's very grim, you know. And the approximation of global illumination is a little too pretty, I think. But you know, that's just personal taste. I like the look of raw ambient occlusion. I think it's a very very sci-fi looking look, to tell you the truth. Uh, but yeah, that's been the way look development occurred, you know, on this project, which is a big step. Now, I had spent, you know, like it should be. I spent most of the time in story, you know, making sure, you know, the animation was telling the story, that, you know, the camera angles were chosen, you know, for you know, for that purpose, and all the lighting and stuff. Yeah, it contributes tons, but I, you know, I've spent a lot of time. I think when you spend most of your time composing a scene, you know, lighting is just icing on the cake. So, you know, this whole look development pass needed to be like so much of production and workflows and stuff like that. It had to be really streamlined. And you can see that I can tell you that actually I got through lighting. Now this is, you check the runtime on this. That's 6,000 frames. Let's see, time code is 4 minutes 30 seconds from wheels up to the current runtime, 4:30. Now I estimate this is going to be roughly 5 minutes in total length without any end credits, which is just everything by me, you know. Well, I actually plan on maybe hiring a composer, maybe a sound designer, at some point if I can afford it. Especially after getting a score, I have reason to believe that I'm only going to be able to afford maybe some mastering at the end, and the scoring, and that's about it. But we'll see. But I imagine, even with credits, it's not going to be much longer than 5 total minutes. A nice round number, hopefully. Uh, but you can see a lot of these, so much of the lighting on everything, especially since this is the easiest possible lighting and look dev. It's one environment, a uniform set of characters. None of them is particularly complex aside from the main character. Uh, and the environment really only changes lighting schemes once to go to this flashback look, which is definitely cooler. The green, the envious color of green. It figures well into the plot line of the whole thing, but that's the only time the look development had to change, and every single node that I dropped was exactly the same. The only one that needed to change for this end scene came through the environment nodes. Oops, they keep going past it. But the environment nodes were just switched in color in the shader editor. So literally, some of the only changes I made were make that green. Right, you can already kind of see I was halfway there, with just that change. Right, but so much of this was made so much simpler by the asset browser, which is, I'm not even using this to a tenth, I would assume, of its actual abilities. But for lighting and look dev, just this small set of stuff accomplishes so much of the heavy lifting that I want for this project, and I'm almost there. Like I said, can get to about 4 minutes in. This is all that's left to light, including the 30 seconds or so at the end of here. Like, this is not full runtime, as I said, but that's all that's left to be lit. And I know I haven't animated the ending yet, but I'm approaching a lot of this short film exactly the way I did my graphic novel. And I would always leapfrog somewhere in the production. Like, if you've ever done a graphic novel or work a comic of any kind, a full color comic especially, you know that the discrete steps of the layout, the inking, lettering, coloring, pagination, and etc. Those are discrete steps in the production of any comic. And when producing some of those, like, I can bring up a page, and you can kind of scroll through some stuff. Like, any one of these pages, you can see this is exactly the same set that we're in. I mean, it's such an important environment in the graphic novel. But every one of these pages goes from, a thumbnail, that's one discrete step. I'll finish all 24 pages that way. And it then goes to layout, which is just me penciling in, getting actual, final composition, on each page. Then going to inks, and you can see, this is digital, so it's just, let me get the black and white line art done. Then it goes to colors, and look development and effects and such, which includes on the lights on this lights on size, effects like this kind of stuff, which wasn't possible in the inks stage. All these colors, overlays and colors, including you can see the digital moire pattern here. All this stuff it feels a lot like any CG production in its discrete steps. So I wanted to approach a short film exactly the way I did this, which is, since there are multiple pages, like this is, I believe this is the first 2 issues of the graphic novel. This is pretty much exactly 48 pages of actual work. I would finish one or 2 issues, like if I had a 5-issue run, I would finish all 5 issues in layouts, right? then start the inks for issue 1, right? When I'm, starting lettering or something, other pages and other issues. Then go all the way back and do, when I finish, layout on everything, uh, go back during like issue 2 or 3 to inks, right? So just kind of, it's leapfrog, but going backwards to start new steps to get forward, if that makes, I'm not making any sense here. But it's just to learn to, I can actually show you just with pages. Okay, if I started issue 1 and I got all the way to issue 2 in terms of thumbnails, right? I would go back to issue 1, start rough pencils on everything for issue 1, right? And then at some point, just go back to the first page of issue 1 and do a couple pages of inks. Then go all the way back to issue 2 and finish pencils and layouts, right? Then go back and finish more, to start inking everything for real again, right? Then get to about, the start of issue 2 with inks, but then go back all the way to issue 1 and start coloring. Does that make sense? That's what I mean by leapfrogging. So you can kind of see that happening with the short film. And it keeps progress on all the discrete steps. Kind of, I know it sounds really taxing, but it really works for me, especially with the short film. The last sequence I'm saving for, animating towards the end of the process, where I've got a lock on multiple sequences in the beginning. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's criminal. You should lock all your animation before you start lighting." Like, no. This process is so flexible that if animation changes, like substantially, in certain shots, the advantage is I've already got all the assets loaded, right? I've already made a pass at everything. So the adjustments are only accelerated by having them already done. If I go backwards, like I'm the only guy working on this, right? So I get to set, the priorities for everything, right? Like I can tell you that this entire flashback sequence, right, was added only after I got to this scene, right? It made sense to go, okay, I need to add a scene here. I need to see something. So I'm going back, going backwards and adding a shot. I realized this even before I started lighting anything. And I'm like, okay, the flexibility there is everything's already built, right? All the assets are already built. I know exactly what beat I need to achieve. So there's no harm in going backwards, I'm not going to miss, my summer premiere window or whatever. The offset of a deadline is entirely up to me, and I've only ever committed to just finishing this year, and I'm already this far in June, or excuse me, July. So I'm 6 months ahead of schedule. If I can finish this in a month, I mean, it's ridiculous, how much further ahead I've gotten than I thought I was going to get. Like, I started doing this a few years ago just to learn Blender. Every Christmas vacation, I would do a short. That started several years ago. I would do either a short or a project or something in Blender, like an animated thing. I think I started that in 2022. A lot of it's on my YouTube channel, and I'll put links there if I get a chance. But with that was it, all of that was just practice. Like, can I actually make a real short film, like not feature length, but an actual fully, a fully realized short based on my own IP with this. I mean, almost all those Christmas projects were Christmas cards of a variety, right? And Santa Claus in some, some reimagining of Santa Claus, whether think at one point he was a basketball player. Another project I did, he was a ninja. There's all-time favorite Christmas card ever was one where it's on my YouTube channel. I'll definitely show you guys that at some point. Um, but it was Santa Claus as a biker. Instead of a sleigh, he's got an eight-cylinder, and you get it, eight tiny reindeer, eight-cylinder motorcycle, which you know, uh, and Rudolph is a deer skull, and it's still got a glowing nose, but it's a deer skull mounted on the front forks of that motorcycle that he's riding, from the North Pole. The saddlebags are filled with the presents magically, right? It was hilarious. But all of that was done in Blender to work up to, a larger production, which, culminated in this encoding Bushido related uh, animated, not feature, but animated short film. Uh, Also, the way this connects to encoding Bushido, this was the first issue ever of the graphic novel. The short film takes place years before that. I mean, this is really the pilot program of what would eventually become the events of encoding Bushido. Like, this is the first issue of the graphic novel, but even before this, I call it issue 0. I've told the story, many hundreds of times, but it's actually written here, I believe. I can read this off for you. Encoding Bushido is a 7-issue series set in an alternative future of Japan, where artificial intelligence, buzzword, competes for existence, status, and resources. The first chapter of Encoding Bushido was published as part of the Samurai graphic novel anthology under the premise, What Does Samurai Mean to You? So that's where all of this started, and it's been several years now. Like, the actual data publication, the first data publication was 2009, so it's been quite a while since that. Not since the graphic novel. I finished the graphic novel in, like it says here, 2018. This debuted at WonderCon 2018. It's the first time I've ever sold out of my comics at a comic book convention. But it's been since 2009 where I've been wanting to do this. There have been other comics in between this stuff. I did my anthology Pages of 8 in the middle of all of this. Then a couple more issues of Trouble, Guts, and Noir, which was another sci-fi noir book. It's more like Blade Runner. It really was a ripoff of Blade Runner. But tons of work, lots of stuff. You can see the design lineage of everything through, especially this issue, the end of issue 2. I mean, this is very much, you can see the little robotic arms and cables and whatnot that are, this is the actual, you can see the design of this gurney throughout the entire thing. It really is. These are all based on SketchUp models that I made for the graphic novel. And I've had a good long life. Gotten many miles out of these particular files. And in the graphic novel, none of them are rendered with any of the SketchUp or Blender renders. I wasn't using Blender during the course of making the graphic novel, but I was using SketchUp. You can see that I put in all the detailing and inking and stuff in Clip Studio Paint for the second issue. And the first issue was actually done in GIMP, which I still use, but Clip Studio Paint handles text so much better than GIMP does, and that was a kind of a deal breaker. It also handles pages and gutters automatically, which is a really great plus. So that's pretty much it. I wanted to get through this, kind of document this particular part of the process because it's so streamlined. I think it's the most impressed I've been with Blender ever. So anyway, if anybody's out there, thanks for watching. I hope I've set a lot of this stuff up to become shorts automatically. So if anybody's interested and see some of those, I'm not going to make any of these files public, of course, but just because of the frankly, the ego of it all. None of this is particularly valuable, I think, to anybody who isn't or doesn't want to work on this project in particular. But anyway, yeah, if anybody's curious about this stuff, if you want to comment about it, how I accomplished anything in the short or the graphic novels, please don't hesitate. Um, Thanks. I'll see you guys next time.